and welcome back to the Chaplain's Compass podcast for interfaith chaplains. My name is Alicia Tremaine.
And my name is John Betz. I'm really excited for this guest that we have today. We have Chaplain Ben Iten. Ben is a certified educator with ACPE over at the Ohio Health Grant Medical Center. Ben is also the vice president and chair of the chaplain committee for the Humanist Society. So we're really excited to have you, Ben. Welcome to the podcast. Yeah, it's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, good to be with you.
Well, just introduce yourself to your audience. What brought you into chaplaincy, and also how has your role changed to where you are now?
Yeah, it's a long story and I'll shorten it up for us here. But at one point, I was pursuing academics and at the Ohio State University, majoring in Jewish studies, actually, even though I was raised in the Christian tradition. That was kind of the mark of my deconstructing out of Christianity, actually, into something else. I hadn't yet solidified into humanism. And so I majored in Jewish studies, did a couple years of graduate work in Hebrew at Ohio State, went overseas to Oxford, did a year of Bible interpretation there. And I envisioned myself as being kind of a pastoral scholar, if that
Mm,
makes sense.
mhm,
A part of my deconstructing process was a very lonely and isolating journey.
hmm,
And I had a Bible professor named Sam Meyer, who's now retired, who taught Bible as literature. And so he would have folks from Campus Crusade from Christ and Chabad House and folks who had been raised in a very sort of traditional reading of what the Bible was and what it looked like. And he would be teaching them something different. And this would be disorienting to them and things along those lines. And his office hours became very pastoral
mm,
in that process. So I would sit outside waiting for him, and he would spend 20, 30 minutes working with students who would be asking, like, how can I be a Christian and be this?
mm,
Or given this context, how can I be a Christian now? And he would help and support them through that journey and that process. And so I kind of saw myself going into academia kind of like him. Not necessarily that people needed to deconstruct, but in that disorientation of learning, just having somebody that was there with them.
Kind of like a
Uh,
chaplain.
kind of like a chaplain, right? Yeah. So when academia didn't work out at Oxford, and I said, well, what the heck do I want to do with my life? It came to the realization that really what I was looking for was to be a journeying with folks in the middle of distress, spiritual wondering, spiritual questioning.
mhm,
And Alicia, as you said, a chaplain is that process of things. And so that's how I got into chaplaincy. And during that time, I transitioned from like Unitarian and Universalism in the classical sense of things, hung out with the Quakers for a bit, went to Methodist seminary. And when I started my CPE process, I was seeking also ordination from the Unitarian Universalist
mm,
Association. That felt like another closet to me, honestly, in a
yeah,
sense. And every time we would do theoretical, our theological reflections and our verbatims and things along those lines, I was always drawing on the Humanist Manifesto and that was kind of my core texts. I found that to be quite challenging. We could talk about that a little bit later.
mm,
So Jason Callahan, my colleague at VCU, had just gotten through board certification through the Humanist Society. And so I said, that is really who I am as kind of having a worldview and philosophy of life.
mhm,
And so let's just go there. And then through the CPE journey as well, I had started CPE identifying as an atheist.
mm,
And CPE helped me go, it's actually more constructive for me personally to not necessarily define myself by what I don't believe in, but by what do believe in.
yeah,
And that kind of turned that corner for me also into more of that humanist identity. And so that was around 2014 that I did that, and then joined the Humanist Society board in 2015 or 16, and I've been kind of doing that ever since.
mm,
So, Ben, what would you say is a good definition of humanism? Maybe a related to question to this is what made you choose also chaplaincy with humanism instead of something like social work or
Yeah.
some other kind of profession?
or like counseling.
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so the definition of humanism, like if you look at the Third Humanist Manifesto, it's a progressive philosophy of life that, without supernaturalism, believes that humanity can live meaningful and ethical lives, seeking for the greater good of humanity. Something along those lines. And when I'm interviewing students or things along those lines, I usually just say something along the lines of, I don't believe in God, but I believe in you. And that is how I work with students. It's how I work with patients. It's a strong belief in the ability of the patient to figure it out on their own.
Hmm.
Or not on their own, but with somebody else, right? But they have it within themselves. They're better theologians than we give them credit for. They're better meaning makers than we give them credit for. And so it is that kind of framework that to me is unique to chaplaincy, and that it is not unpacking their life story for a patient necessarily. It's not helping them figure out what sort of psychological pathologies they might have, but it is in the moment. How is their meaning making system working for them, and how can they move through that space? How can they be in that space?
Hmm.
And for me, that is the unique chaplaincy lens. Is it informed by behavioral health? Sure. Is it informed by other disciplines? Absolutely. But for me, our lens is this meaning making spirituality of people, whatever that framework might be. And that is kind of what has always intrigued me. And again, my experience of my own deconstructions being isolating and lonely, I didn't want that to be the same experience for other folks.
Hmm.
So at the hospital bed, there's at least a community of one other person in that space and willing to be with them and not question their questions, but to journey with them and be with them in that space wherever it may lead.
Yeah, a safe place for people where it's okay for them to ask questions and for them to have that freedom.
Yeah. Or to not ask those questions if that's what makes it meaningful, right? It'd be like, I'm going to stand on this truth and this is my truth. Great. Tell me more about that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what is that truth for you? Yeah.
Out of just sheer curiosity,
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about like how do you support individuals who are identified as humanists in your
Right.
practice or non-religious, atheist, agnostic,
Hmm.
spiritual but not religious?
Yeah. So the way I usually do it is, I'm listening for those key values that are important to them and how those values are informing their decision making process in the hospital, because I'm a hospital chaplain, right? So that context. So it is this idea that even though we don't believe in God, we do have some values that we're trying to live out of. And we do have a certain moral and ethical code that we're trying to make our decisions around. And sometimes hospitals don't pay attention to those, or there's a certain cultural bias that atheists and humanists and secular folks are amoral or don't have certain particular values. And so to be able to name that with them, explore that with them, and help that get translated then to the hospital staff as values, not as just they're making some random decision, but they're making this decision based on
Hmm.
a certain ethic, a certain value for us, has been important in that process of things. In particular, like what has come up a lot for us is humanist and secular folks. Research seems to indicate that we move to comfort care quicker than other folks.
Hmm.
Mm,
And so sometimes we move to comfort care quicker than the medical team is ready for us to.
interesting.
And so there's some advocacy to go like, yes, they're not depressed necessarily. They're not suicidal. They're actually coming from a value system
Mhm.
that says there is no necessary value to the suffering. So why do I continue that?
Mhm. Or
In
maybe
fact, it
then
might
hope
be,
for a cure may be different.
yeah, the futility, like futile care, why do I want to extend the medical hospital bill of my family members? Why do I want to increase that suffering if there's a way that I can manage my suffering, manage how I say goodbye to my family, manage the legacy that I leave behind for those after me? That is kind of one of the
Mm.
core values for us, especially as we're facing death, because we don't have an afterlife. Our afterlife is the legacy, how people remember us, the morals and ethics that we may have taught the folks, our children, or influenced in our community, and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
I mean, I love that. It's and paired with that, a lot of your journeying is with people in terms of their values, their meaning making. You hinted a little bit about, if somebody wants to stand on their truth, great. Tell me more about that. In that vein, I'd love to hear more about how you provide for those different kinds of faith traditions, interfaith, pluralistic contexts, and how do you collaborate with chaplains from different religious and spiritual backgrounds?
Sure. The collaborating with, working with patients from different traditions, is honestly not that hard for me without getting too philosophical. That might take a long time to talk about things. There is a certain freedom to humanism in the sense that there's no guiding path or truth. So that actually makes it free for folks to create the truth that they need in that moment.
Mm,
So I don't need to impose my space. And in fact, it's about, joining them in their truth and helping them figure out how they can live into that more in that space of things. And so it is very much, I talk a lot of it. I kind of taken Carrie Doherty's work on theological empathy and like have applied that into that work of chaplaincy of I'm being theologically empathic with the person in front of me, joining
mhm,
them in their worldview. I allow the projection to happen. I don't self-disclose to a patient unless they really, really push me. And I try to live into that space with them as much as they can. I do personally pray with my patients if they want. I see it as deep reflective listening in the vernacular of the patient.
mm,
Hmm, I like that.
And when it comes, the line for me is then when they want sacraments, where it is for me, and this is what I teach my non-Christian students as well, where for me it is really important that the person administering them does believe in the, for lack of a better word, the magic behind the ritual, right? Or the
yeah,
meaning behind the ritual, right? And so at that point, then it's like, yeah, so had a great conversation. You want these sacraments. That's wonderful.
mm,
I'm not Christian. I was raised Christian. I know how to do it, but I've got some lovely Christian colleagues that would be, wonderful to come up and spend some, do this for you if you would like. And so we do that. Same thing with Jewish rituals, Muslim rituals, things along those lines. When we get to those spots where it's real important that the person doing it believes in it, then that's when I farm out to my colleagues in that space of things. And they farm out secular folks to me too in a variety of different ways
Mhm.
when they feel like it's out of their depth or they feel like, that they do a spiritual assessment and they realize that this person maybe would somebody doesn't want to talk to a chaplain right away because they're an atheist. It is nice to have an atheist chaplain on staff,
I bet.
you know, that you can kind of call on and be like, I got one upstairs if you want to talk to him.
And I bet they're surprised a little bit.
They are. Yeah, and it's usually, I have to spend the first half of the visit, like, convincing them that am, in fact, a humanist, and I work from this foundation of
I'm not
things.
trying to trick you.
I'm not there's no bait and switch here, you can Google me if you want. Here's where I am. Here's what I do.
That's interesting. Ben, you were talking earlier that sometimes you have to do that advocacy for folks who are humanist or secular, and that sometimes you have to be a bit of a translator to the medical team. And it sounds like you also have to do some of that for yourself as a chaplain to have some advocacy. And I think you had mentioned to me before that you were the first humanist chaplain to be certified by ACPE as an educator.
Mm.
So you're blazing some terrain there. What challenges do you face as a humanist chaplain and or in promoting diversity and inclusion in healthcare or in your own organization or chaplaincy in general?
Yeah. Sometimes people don't believe me when I identify as a humanist or like that I don't believe in God. And there's the disorientation of they meet me and I'm a nice guy and, I care for my students and my patients. And there's some disorientation in that. And there's often a lot of questions and challenges around that space. There is often, I'm debating whether or not to tell the story. Do it. So,
Pull
no,
on the shoulder.
my theories you over share sometimes, but that's all right.
As Saint Palpatine would say, "Do it."
Do it. Yes. So, I was talking this morning at Lisi about some drama that had happened, and it was because the system I work in also contracts with other hospital systems in the area.
Hmm,
And I had we still are, I'm just not doing it. But I was supposed to be doing CPE unit for a Catholic hospital system in the area.
Mm,
Once they found out actually, they were afraid that Bishop would find out the educator was me, and they said, "No, we don't want that anymore." And
mhm,
so I got pulled off of that, and that's okay. We were doing a lot of different work, and I'm taking over this different residency unit, which is fine. But there are these places where folks still don't trust folks like me to
mm,
actually be able to do this work. or they're afraid I'm going to like try to convert their students or things along those lines.
Does it feel like rejection to you? How does that feel?
At this point, no. If it is, I kind of prepped the team that I work with that this was probably going to be happening because we were starting to expand this net. And I was like,
Yeah.
don't be surprised if this happened. So it wasn't particularly surprising. It was a little surprising that it happened so like farther down the line. Like it wasn't like we said all of a sudden, oh, and Ben's going to be your educator and he's a humanist. Like this had been going on for months and months and months. And I had done CPE for them in another district with a different bishop who would be okay with me, but it is
Yeah.
moving into this different space that there was that anxiety, and they were like, we don't want that here." So, is it feel like rejection? No, I mean, in the same way that a patient saying, "I don't wanna see a chaplain," isn't necessarily rejection, it's just kinda like, "Eh, I'm not the right fit for you."
Yeah.
Okay, I got 6 other chaplains, I got 6 other educators that will be a better fit for you. Here you go. And it's nice to work in a larger system that allows me to do that. Um,
That makes sense. Kinda like you just got kicked out of somebody's room, but
yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah. They find out I'm a humanist. They're like, I don't want you. I need a Christian. Great. I got 6 Christians. I'll send one of them up. They essentially said the same thing, just with an educator. We don't want your humanist educator. Great. I got 6 Christian educators. I can easily make a switch. Here you go. So that was that process of things. So there is sort of that scheme of things going on. And a bit of a personal pet peeve is that we get called unaffiliated, we get lumped in the nuns
Yeah.
at times, and I am affiliate. I'm a humanist. Like that is an affiliation, that is an identity. And I'm not spiritual, but not religious. I'm a humanist. So the overlap of those two, especially in a lot of modern research on spiritual care and things like that, we all get lumped together, the secular and the SBNRs as one kind of mass. And we're not. We're separate. We're different. We are different things.
Could you unpack a little bit of that? Because I probably would have done the same thing.
Yeah. So research seems to show that SBNRs actually still hold to theism that necessarily wouldn't necessarily be a part of humanism.
Yeah.
And many folks who identify as SBNRs are actually still hold on to their theology. The structures of the religion that they were in no longer meets their needs. And so the theology hasn't necessarily shifted as much as their affiliation has.
Hmm.
And so the nuns are more diverse than we give them credit for. And secular folks are not a part of that. And we're more diverse than we give us credit for, too. So to kind of get us all lumped together in one thing makes things mushy in a way that I don't particularly like.
What does the Humanist Society do for you, or what is the mission of that organization?
So, two pronged. The first is developing more chaplains and celebrants. Celebrants are the folks who do the weddings and funerals and all that stuff and provide a community and support for those folks and advocate for our roles within our humanist communities. Most of us are deconverters from a variety of different religions and balk sometimes when humanism starts putting on religious trappings like a chaplain. And so to have us move into and support our communities can sometimes be met with resistance on that side of things. And so the Humanist Society also does work. Say, I talk to chaplains about humanism, and humanism is about chaplains in that space of going, yeah, we're here for you. We can support you, and we can not necessarily the role of the traditional pastor, but we can provide meaningful support for you in that space.
How does that look like practically? Like, how do you provide that kind of support? And you mentioned communities. Do you all get together and have potlucks or
Potluck?
I hope it
We
is
have
because
potlucks.
disrespectful. I just
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the churches I went to, first started going to on a Sunday potluck. But yeah, so we do picnics. We have the community that I'm a part of, that I'm associated with, does monthly meetings where there's kind of a conversation and talk about things. We do hiking out in Hocking Hills, if you know the Ohio
yep.
area, and things along those lines. We volunteer at the homeless shelter to hand out food on a regular basis. We clean up the highway, we march in pride, and all those different things. And so, yes, we do provide community that way. The way that I was on the board for a long time, just recently stepped down, and a part of what I did though in that space was on our newsletter email that would go out, there was a talk to a chaplain button,
Hmm.
so if they needed to talk to a chaplain, they could click on that and they would email me directly their contact information. They could put in a little kind of information about what they wanted to talk about. And so that was the primary way that most people, if they didn't see me in the community doing, hanging out at the monthly talk or at the picnics or whatever, that's a way for them to get a hold of me and have a talk if they needed to have a talk.
Nice.
And that's a growing edge for the Humanist Society and humanism in general, as far as what does that look like? How are we integrated and how do we do that sort of space of things?
At our last episode, Ben, we talked with a chaplain who spent some time in Antarctica, and we talked about just his sense of awe and mystery when he was there. How is that for you? What role does mystery play in your life and in awe?
Yeah, awe is an amazing thing. When you hold all still happens and mystery still happens in the sense of, we are brought here by random evolutionary chance. Even this conversation, from our perspective, it just happened, right?
Mhm.
And there's no guiding person or anything like that. It happened. And that adds a rarity, a uniqueness to this time and space, which is also awe-inspiring to a certain thing. And the same thing when we look up at the universe and the stars and we think of the vastness of the universe, it makes me feel small and humbling in an awe-inspiring way
Mm.
to think that I got to be alive for 40 some odd years so far and in the space. That's pretty cool and awe-inspiring. We rely a lot on reason and science. Those are our primary ways of knowing things, but we don't say that we know everything. And the nice thing about science is it gives room for going, oh, we were wrong. We figured out more about it, and now we kind of think of it as this way.
Mhm.
And so for us, let me say it for me when I'm talking about humanism and awe and mystery, there's a lot that I don't know.
Mhm.
There's a lot of mystery in the universe still. I don't necessarily make that jump to go, okay, that mystery then is God
Mhm.
Yeah.
or the divine or some supernatural space, but that mystery is just something we haven't figured out yet. And that's cool. And that is what
Yeah.
kind of drives our curiosity and learning to want to do even more in that space of things. So for me, that's kind of how I think about awe and mystery and sort of this kind of random chance that brings us together and has put us here together at the same time is fascinating and awe-inspiring and gives me goosebumps when I think about it.
Nice.
So, and I would love to hear more about going with that. What if somebody's interested in going through that process of becoming a humanist chaplain or doing that? What does that path look like?
Oh, it's a windy, twisty way. We are creating it to be more solidified. Actually, when I was back in the day when I first joined, it was essentially the Universal Life Church of Chaplains, right? As long as you had some sort of secular identity, you paid them $50. Great. Much to the chagrin of some of our applicants these days, that has changed and continues to be changing. So now we do look for a Master's of Divinity or equivalency still. And the University of the Twin Cities and what is it, UTS of the Twin Cities? Union Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities has an MDiv in humanism, if
Oh,
you
wow.
wanna get it, and fully accredited. We also have a fully accredited humanist certificate, so if you already have an MDiv and you wanna, get more solid in your humanism, you can go through that program too or take a couple classes, and sometimes people who apply to us and we say, you're a great chaplain and you are secular, but you need kinda more of that humanism in you," we will say, "Yeah, go take some extra courses in this process." And yeah.
What would be an example of that? You're secular, but you need more. What's that flavor of humanism from the secular? I'd love. This is fascinating to me.
Yeah, so it is, there are Humanism has a rich history, not just in the West, but there's all sorts of humanist manifestations in Eastern traditions and African traditions and
Mhm.
things along those lines. And so, in some ways, we would like our folks to at least have some awareness of the diversity of the way humanism is represented and has been represented. And so, there's some of that. One can go, "Yeah, I don't believe in God anymore, but I don't know what to do next, and I think I'm a humanist, or I believe in, kind of I can agree with what is going on in the Humanist Manifesto, like, that resonates with me." We'll go, "Great, we'll endorse you, your initial endorsement's X amount of years. In the meanwhile, learn more about humanism, learn more about our history." We have philosophy courses on kind of stoicism and its influence on
Mm.
humanism, utilitarianism, materialism. Like humanism has grown through a variety of different philosophies that have been influential on us. And so it's just kind of wanting them to learn that. Some of it, I had a student, I was doing a guest lecture, and one of the students I said, "Yeah, you need to go take some more humanist courses. We'll endorse you, but take some more humanist courses." They were in there and they said, "This is my third polity class." So some of it is just kind of humanist polity to a
Yeah.
certain extent, but yeah, all different kind of ways.
So, what's the funniest interaction that you've ever had with somebody who's quite different from you?
Yeah, I don't know. I was I was racking my brain for this one. I think, I do get delight, honestly, in the disorientation my presence brings, in particular to students who are of a particular flavor of Christianity. I've had a student who just their first individual session with me was 45 minutes ago, and I don't know what to do with you, Ben. I don't know what to do with you. Like, who are you? Is this for you? Are you for real? Is this you? I don't know what to do with you. And they were laughing, and I was laughing, and that's about the funniest thing I can think of. Like, that happens fairly regularly. Like, I self-disclose in the interview, I'm like, "Just so that you know, if you decide to join us, I'm a humanist, I'm a humanist chaplain, here's what it means." And they go, "Yeah, okay, I can work with that," because they want the job, right? And it's a different thing when it is actually working with me and that disorientation hits, and they're like, "This guy is really nice, and he really cares for me, and
Mhm.
he knows the Bible, he just doesn't agree with it, and he still is a nice guy, and he's not trying to deconvert me, and he's letting me be me, and I don't know what to do with that." And I do delight in that disorientation, quite honestly. Other than that, to be frank, most of my interactions, are more frustrating than funny.
My first interaction with a humanist chaplain was actually meeting Bart Campolo over in
Yeah,
Cincinnati.
he's in Cincinnati, yeah.
And he had a podcast called Humanize Me. And I just remember him talking about his mission. And I was like, I love a lot of what you're talking about, just because he was talking about, I'm there to be a resource and a person who's able to, a safe place and
Mhm,
to support all people. And I was blown away by that. So,
mhm. Yeah. I have a certified educator candidate that I'm working with in a different hospital, and he had his students read a chapter in a book written by Greg Epstein, who is the Harvard humanist chaplain.
Mhm.
Their disorientation over the idea that he could be good without God just like sparked a 45-minute digression for his students into some other track, but it was them essentially going, "Yes, God is real, God is real, God is real." And even though Greg didn't say anything about that in his chapter, right? He's just saying, "Here's how I am good without God. Here's how I form my ethics."
mhm.
Right.
And some of that is just in and of itself a disorienting statement. And so, yeah, I do get some delight in when my students manifest that with me, and especially when it manifests in curiosity and learning and just trying to figure it out. Like that's just fun.
Well, John, you're mentioning hearing Bart's mission, and one of the things I was thinking about is that it's always been hard for any of us chaplains to measure the impacts that we have, and say this encounter was effective or successful or helpful or however you want to define that. I don't know that that's any different for someone who's a humanist chaplain, but how do you yourself define or tend to measure the impact of your chaplaincy work?
It is a bit self-centered, but when I walk out of the room kind of feeling like a real human connection was made with the other patient, that to me is a good visit. When they're in tears when I leave, that's always a good sign that there's some sort of human connection.
You like to see people anxious and sad. What's wrong with you?
And joyful. I'm a certified educator, right? That is kind of the two sides of that coin. Angry too. Be angry with me. I will be angry with you.
Let's have a reaction. Let's learn from
Yes,
it.
let's do it. No, actually, I have a very cooperative model of CPE. I've put away the older generation's concept
Oh,
model
bless
of
you.
CPE.
Thank you very much, by the way.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, glad to do it. It was traumatic for me, it may not be traumatic for others. And, what was the question?
I'm sorry. It was you were saying when you have a real human connection.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. How do I measure that sort of thing? Yeah, that sort of thing. I get warm, fuzzy feelings too, and kind of when I walk out of a room with a warm, fuzzy feeling, I think that was a good visit. A lot of times, especially when you're just rounding, you get a lot of those introductory visits. Here's what chaplaincy is. Here's what we're doing. Oh, thanks, chaplain. I don't need to talk to you. Okay, great. But those visits where it's like, yeah, sit down, have a conversation. They feel connected. They feel supported. We're a level one trauma center, the busiest in Ohio. And when I know that the family members are going to leave the hospital safe, if not sound, at least, that's a good chaplain time. It's been effective. I believe in mirroring a lot with my patients. So if I'm on the floor with them, it's like I'm kind of sitting where they sit and interacting how they interact. And so when there's those particularly like physical visits, I feel good about those too.
Yeah.
If I can fill out a spiritual assessment box, and the charting, sure, that's a good visit too.
I love how you define prayer as deep listening in that patient's vernacular. I always feel like when you really can speak back to them something true that you've heard from them, that's always a good visit. What advice would you have then to somebody who's listening and thinking, I resonate with Ben, maybe I want to be a humanist chaplain? I know you talked a little bit about the process, but
Yeah.
what advice would you have?
Look at the American Humanist Association. Google the Humanist Manifesto. We're in our third rendition of it. I expect in the next 20 years or so we'll be in our fourth. That's as it should be from our perspective. But take a look at it. Humanism and its aspirations is this version of things. And does that still speak to you? If so, then you look at the Humanist Society. And we are the largest endorsing body for humanist chaplains. Certainly not the only. If you're more in religious naturalism, the religious naturalists have started endorsing chaplains. The UUA has humanists in it as well. It's all different paths, but that, and then see what we require. We require an MDiv. Do you have one already? Are you willing to do it? We require at least one unit of CPE. We have different levels depending on the amount of CPE you get through. And reach out to us. Our office is lovely, willing to support. In the end, you'll probably be talking to me anyway, but that's the proper channels to talk to get to me and at least get into our files officially so that we can kind of build that relationship. Because what we're looking for is not just rubber stamping somebody or rejecting somebody, but we want a relationship. And that's why we started just within the last year, the aspirant level of endorsement that says, I'm humanist curious or I'm chaplain curious. And so it is not a flat out rejection, but it is to say, yeah, come be in relationship with us for a couple years. Talk to us. We'll sign you up with a mentor. You can just kind of figure out if humanism is for you, if chaplaincy is for you, and we'll get you down that path together.
Well, part of it is figuring out whether or not you want to make sure that they're wearing your name well, and also it's a good fit both ways.
Yep.
I know that it's similar to whenever I meet certain Christians of certain denominations, sometimes my mind automatically goes to, oh, I think I know a little bit about where they're coming from in terms of their faith tradition, their approach to scripture, their approach to providing ministry. But, making sure that there's that relationship so that it is a good fit.
Yes, absolutely. And what the Humanist Society is trying to do is this sort of relational accountability where it goes both ways. And a part of that relational component is also kind of decolonizing what we mean by humanism,
Hmm.
right? So humanism doesn't have to look like how I make it look, right? That humanism is actually and depending on the culture you come from, may look different. Depending on the tradition you are working out of, may look different. And so that relationship allows us to learn what does humanism look like to you, and try to figure out how we can make that fit within our community. Or if we can't, you've got relationships with all sorts of different folk, and maybe we can find the community with you that kind of represents where you're moving more. And so that's kind of a part of how we're seeing it too.
It's very pastoral too.
I try. We're an organization of chaplains, right? We're trying to be
Yeah.
chaplainy to our future folk.
Yeah. Speaking of future folk, what's your vision for the future of humanist chaplaincy?
I think we're gonna keep growing. We in the first half of last year, we had more applicants than we had in the entire year the year before.
Mm,
Wow.
So I see that continuing to grow. I think what I would like to see humanism in general and humanist chaplaincy kind of taking the lead on this is humanism historically in America has been a political advocacy movement
yep.
and not really a philosophy of life, at least as it's been manifested here. If you look at UK, it is a little bit of both. And what I see us doing here in America is Anthony Pinn from Rice University, African American humanist scholar. He talks about humanism as a soft place to land.
Mm,
And I don't think we've given folks a real clear soft place to land, really as a movement. And I see chaplains being kind of the forefront of arguing and presenting and making it manifest this idea of humanism really is a soft place to land. And here's how you can do it.
yeah.
And here's the people you can do it with.
Yeah, I love that. I went to this conference that was over in Europe, and one of the chaplains who was there, her name is Lindsay DeWall. She was the first humanist chaplain, I think, for the NHS over in UK,
Yep.
and a brilliant person. And she actually just finished her doctorate. But one of the things that a lot of people were very interested to hear. Hey, what separates you from a counselor? And she said, with a lot of specialties, it's all about diagnosis. But chaplaincy doesn't diagnose. We basically talk with people, and from that, our curiosity leads toward what that person needs. And so this difference, I know, does that resonate with what you're talking about too?
Yeah, I think it does, and that kinda I do have this internal resistance some to kind of when chaplains start diagnosing their patients,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, "No, no, 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 that's not," my pedagogies are particularly depathologizing pedagogies.
Mhm.
I see those as a form of colonialism, in and of itself, and so I think humanism Anthony Pinn, and I agree with him, argues that humanism is like the next step in liberation theology. If you're going to be a liberation theologian, the next step is humanism. And so, to the extent that, yeah, we are here to not diagnose, but to support from within their space. Yeah, that rings
Mm.
true with me.
Oh, yeah, I mispronounced her name, Lindsay DeVall. She's
I do know who you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
so that's fascinating. Do you have any, like, books that you'd recommend or any kind of resources?
Yeah. So I mentioned Anthony Pinn, right? He has a wonderful book. I recommend it as foundational reading for all humanist chaplains.
Mm,
Is The End of God Talk towards African American Humanist Theology,
wow, okay.
which is great. I recommend that highly. Dave Savage has a book, although it's particularly UK oriented, on secular pastoral care or pastoral care for non-believers, which is good. There's a wonderful book by Greta Christina that is very small but has a long title, Comforting Thoughts About Death That Have Nothing to Do with God, and is wonderful, very accessible, and gives a good sort of introductory understanding of how humanism can approach death and suffering in that process of things. Those would probably be the 3 easiest books. We don't have a lot of books right now, honestly. We could do more with those, but
When are you writing yours? Is that on your list?
oh, if I could get through my imposter syndrome, it would be great. It would be done already.
I say do it.
Yeah.
All those people have, yeah.
You could do a compendium where you could just connect with Greg Epstein and Lindsay DeVall and
See, that is more my style, honestly, like an edited resource
There you
of
go.
how did different humanist chaplains approach humanism, approach their work. That's more my style than just saying like, here's my authoritative humanist chaplaincy understanding.
We need another white guy to tell his story. No, I feel the same way. I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't need to be another
yeah,
voice
yeah,
in the wilderness.
yeah.
Well, speaking of your style, we always ask this question to all of our guests, and I'd love to hear from you. What's giving you life these days?
Yeah, honestly, what's giving me most life these days is my work with the Humanist Society. I'm really excited with the changes we've made and we're making. As of this recording, more changes are coming that I can't really talk about just yet. But, I think what you're going to see from humanism over the next 12 months, 24 months is really exciting,
Hmm.
and being able to be a part of those meetings and those conversations is life-giving to me. Like when we talk about there's no afterlife, there's only legacy. This is like these conversations I feel are like a part of my legacy
Ah,
in the space of things. Is it temporary? Sure, but it'll last for a little bit. Yeah.
yeah. That's great that your work is feeling so exciting.
Yeah, it's fun. My wife will retire. I probably will not because I just love my work. It's like so many things.
I get it. I joke with
Mhm.
my wife that my retirement policy is literally tripping and falling in a 6-foot hole.
Yeah, that's how it goes. I think CPE educators do that for retirement, right? They retire, and then
Yep.
that just means they're teaching in a bunch of different places as a contract educator rather than
Wow.
like within one system.
Ben, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful to talk with you and hear your story and also hear about your passion for the manifestation of providing care for people.
Yeah. Thanks. It was a pleasure to be with you folks.
And now it's time for the non anxious presence. I'm Elise Tremaine.
And I'm John Betz.
John, I love this conversation because honestly, read articles, listened to talks from humanist chaplains, but I had never actually had the opportunity to have a conversation about that with someone. And I was struck by the fact that the way that Ben described how he sees chaplaincy, his work, his practice is not very different from how I view it and describe it for myself, which is listening for people's values, listening for how they are making meaning, and I love how he said, people are better theologians and meaning makers than we give them credit for. It made me think of that scene in The Wizard of Oz where, what is her name? Glinda tells Dorothy, "It's been inside of you all along, Dorothy. You've had the power all along." So I was thinking about that when he was describing that piece of it. How about you? What stood out for you?
For me, I want to go now read the Humanist Manifesto just because
Yeah.
I think it seems like it was a document that really meant a lot to him. But also for me, it's really what surprised me was just the differences between spiritual without religious, humanist, secular, and there are these separations between those and learning more about the tradition of humanism
Mm-hmm.
and the decolonization. That was fascinating for me to hear because for me as a white guy, I just want to continually decolonize my thinking. And rather than leading from my privilege, I want to lead from curiosity. So for me, it's been that was quite illuminating to me.
Yeah. Another thing that stood out for me too, and I mentioned this to him, was how he described prayer as deep listening and then speaking it out in other people's vernacular. Because one thing that I've always really found meaningful as a chaplain is to pray with people. And a big part of the reason why I find it so meaningful is because of that ability to speak out what I've been able to listen and take in from the patients, because it's such a moment of connection and validation, I think, for people to feel like you see me, you hear me, and to be witness to what that person is experiencing through prayer. That's a big part of why it's meaningful for me. So for me to hear him describe it like that, it resonated with me.
Yeah. No, I love that. It reminds me a lot of my dad's a doctor, now retired, but one of the things that he always said was he was a family practitioner and he always talked about how he would always use his stethoscope on people,
Mm,
and because that might have been the only time that person had been touched by another
yeah.
person, maybe for years, and being a safe place of being touched. And I think as chaplains, being able to spiritually, not literally, but spiritually have that connection and that touch in a safe way is so important, not only within chaplaincy, but I think the way that Ben's able to do that for people who might have strong reaction towards theists or people who are very religious. He could be that safe person and maybe have that initial 5 minutes of, but are you for real? Are you really
Mhm.
humanist? are we really trying not to this is not a bait and switch? Okay, great.
Yeah, nice. Well, I loved too that he gave us some misconceptions that we might have about humanism and debunked some of them and talked about the challenges that he has as well. But one thing that I did find surprising was when he was talking about his community, a sense of community with humanism, which I was curious
Yes.
about. I wanted to know more about that. And I didn't get the opportunity to ask him. Maybe I will someday. Is there a humanist choir? Are there, kinds of music that are meaningful that people like to sing together? Because I think for a lot of people, going to church, that's a big part of it is just the music and being able to sing
Mm,
together.
yeah,
So something that I still am a little curious about.
that's great. Yeah, I loved how he talked about how, he doesn't do sacraments, but another term for sacrament that's used in the Eastern Orthodox Church is the mysteries. And so I would wonder what the mysteries of humanism could be. Not that I'm trying to force them into being some sort of sacramental tradition, but more just what are some ways of touching into that transcendence, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I love it. Ben talked about Greg Epstein, and Greg is also a humanist chaplain over at Harvard, I believe. So I believe his book, Good Without God, What a Billion Non Religious People Do Believe, there's a great quote that I was able to find, and it reads: "A key moment in discovering goodness without God, in becoming a humanist, is realizing that both of these postures are crooked. We are not wicked, debased, helpless creatures waiting for a heavenly king or queen to bless us with strength, wisdom, and love. We have the potential for strength, wisdom, and love inside ourselves. But by ourselves, we are not enough. We need to reach out beyond ourselves to the world that surrounds us and sustains us, and most especially to other people."
It's been with you all along, Dorothy, or within you all along. Well, to you, our listeners, we thank you for spending this time with us. Don't forget to leave us a review. That's always so helpful to share the podcast, like, subscribe, all those good things, and to continue to give us ideas for future episodes because we love to hear from you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. And thanks for utilizing us, your podcast, and the way that you can grow and learn as chaplains as we navigate these sometimes unsettling but exciting waters.
Bye, y'all.